Welcome to the HBCU podcast. We'll be joined by some awesome HBCU grads in the form of co-hosts and guests for this podcast. Just so you know, the HBCU podcast comes from our love of historically Black colleges and universities. So often, we get information related to our university students, but we rarely get a look into the great things our alumni are doing. On this episode, we speak with Dr. David Staten. He's a graduate of South Carolina State University. David serves as Professor of Rehabilitation Counseling at South Carolina State. He's also the editor-in-chief of HBCU Times Magazine. During this episode, we talk about his work in higher education, his HBCU experience, and his popular publication, HBCU Times Magazine. Keep listening. It's the HBCU podcast.
David Staten, a 1992 graduate of South Carolina State University.
Well, welcome to the HBCU podcast. I'm so excited to have you on as a guest, especially with everything that I've been seeing that you've been doing with HBCU Times. And of course, we want to talk to you about your HBCU experience, how you got into all of that. But first and foremost, where are you from?
I'm originally from a small town called Camden, South Carolina.
Okay, I'm familiar with Camden. And how'd you end up at South Carolina State?
Well, I've been on that campus since I was a little boy, 6 years old. My mom and my aunt used to bring me to the football games down at Oliver C. Dawson Stadium. And so I've been immersed within that campus culture for a very long time. After I graduated from high school, that was pretty much the only school that I wanted to attend. And that's the only school I actually applied to. And, that's how I ended up at South Carolina State University.
Very cool. So you have a long history with the university. Are your parents or your family South Carolina State graduates?
Well, my aunt graduated from South Carolina State. I have an older sister that graduated from South Carolina State University, and I have a ton of relatives and cousins and friends that also graduated from South Carolina State University. So it's definitely in my DNA.
See, it was ingrained. You had no choice, huh?
That's right. That's right.
I love it. Okay, so you graduated from South Carolina State in the 90s, correct?
That's correct.
So how has the campus and everything, the university in general, changed since then?
Well, when I was a student at South Carolina State in the 90s, there were a lot more students at the time. I think we were at close to 5,000 students. Right now, we're at about 3,000 students. So in terms of just the number of students enrolled, that's changed a lot. But in terms of the energy and the family atmosphere and the mentoring and the nurturing, that goes on that campus, all of that is absolutely the same. And, so just excited to be back and contributing as a faculty member.
You obtained both your bachelor's and your master's from South Carolina State, correct?
That's correct.
And then you headed off to Iowa for a PhD. So was that always your plan when you got there to continue to get your master's and then move on to get your PhD?
No, that was not always my plan. I actually wanted to go to law school, but like a lot of undergraduates, when it was time to graduate, I really wasn't prepared to go to law school, and I hadn't even taken the LSAT. And one of my mentors from my undergraduate program asked me to consider looking into the master's degree program in rehabilitation counseling. And, I was offered, at the time, it was a fellowship called the Patricia Roberts Harris Research Fellowship, and it paid full tuition, free. So I got free tuition and I got $833 a month just to go to school to study counseling. And I actually fell in love with the counseling profession. And from there, I went to Iowa. I was attending a conference as a scholar on that particular fellowship, and I met the faculty from the University of Iowa at that particular conference. And this was around 1993. And there was another conference going on during the spring of 93 in Minnesota. And I attended that conference and I jumped on a van, only Black kid, on a van with some students from the University of Iowa and traveled back to the campus and was interviewed on the spot, and that's kind of how I ended up in Iowa.
Now
Exactly.
you're on faculty at South Carolina State. Is that the only institution you've worked at throughout your career?
That's the only institution I've served as a faculty member. When I first graduated from the University of Iowa, I actually worked as a counselor for South Carolina State Federal Vocational Rehabilitation for about a year or so. And after that, I took a job working for Student Support Services at the University of South Carolina, Lancaster, pretty much from like maybe 1999 to 2001. And then in 2001, I returned back to South Carolina State University as a faculty member, and I've been on the faculty there for 17 years now.
Oh, wow. Now, we had a few individuals, maybe two or so, who have are faculty at different institutions. One at HBCU, another
Mhm.
is, and I've always asked them about the higher education and the lack of diversity, not
Mhm.
necessarily with HBCUs, but in a lot of our other institutions. So, with you
Mhm.
being a long serving faculty member and in the education profession for so long, why do you think that has not, the diversity at a lot of colleges hasn't changed too much over the years?
I think because there's a ton of pressure. If you're talking about faculty positions at um, predominantly white institutions and why there is not more diversity. First of all, there has to be a commitment to diversity, and I don't think a lot of schools actually have that commitment to recruiting faculty of color. They talk a good game, but I don't think they're really interested, in having that type of diversity. So for a faculty member to obtain a job at one of those schools is usually a pretty rigorous and difficult process. So it's kind of hard to land tenure track positions at predominantly white institutions, and then once you land them, it's even more difficult for faculty to retain those jobs. So you see a lot of minorities, they get those jobs and then they don't get tenure and then they end up moving on. So the two things I would say is an institutional lack of commitment to diversity, and then to support once they do hire faculty of color. Because once you hire us, you got to offer some type of support system for us to be able to be successful within those systems. And they seem to be happy with having one. So you probably can find one minority on most faculty at those types of institution, and that seems to be what they're content.
Yeah, I heard the same thing from, like I said, a few of the other guests, and the commitment is true. But you also talked about support, and earlier you spoke of having a mentor. So, how important is it for students, especially going into graduate programs or going into programs where they're hoping to obtain a PhD and move into faculty? How important is it for
Mhm.
them to have a mentor?
I think it's extremely important. Once you get to that level, the academic coursework is really not that different from what you experience on the master's level, but the level of politics become a little bit more complicated. So it's imperative that you really have a mentor to kind of help you navigate through some of the political things that go on. When you're pursuing a PhD or other terminal degrees.
Yeah, mentors are always important, but I've really heard a lot of people speak about mentorship when it comes to navigating through PhD programs and getting those opportunities that could possibly, help catapult you into a different position.
Exactly. I said when I left South Carolina State, I'm leaving at HBCU, and then I'm going to Iowa. A state that was at the time Iowa was 97% white, and, you know, just being isolated in an environment is really important to identify somebody who kind of looks like you to kind of help you out. And we had not just faculty mentors, but we also had peer mentors. If you take a look at most predominantly white institutions, they they recruit from HBCU. So, my colleagues, even at the University of Iowa, my friends were from Howard University, Hampton University, Claflin University, Morgan State, and et cetera. So, in addition to having faculty mentors, it was very important to find peer mentors as well. And that's really what kind of, helped sustain me through that process. And right now, I have 5 students that graduated from South Carolina State who are currently enrolled in that same doctoral program at the University of Iowa. And, I hear the same things, from them that I experienced when I was a student there back in the 90s. So not a lot has changed.
Wow. Well, speaking of, the institutions having a commitment to diversity, you saying that's something that they should have, but
Mhm.
um, how did the administrative part of it all look? Were there a lot of black deans, department chairs, or presidents? How did that look, and do you think that's something that could help better or further
Yeah.
diversify some of those institutions and their faculty?
At the time, in the mid 90s, um, there weren't really any African American administrators. I think there was one African American brother in the School of Graduate Studies, so he wasn't necessarily in our department, but he was very supportive. And he was only there for about a year, and he took another job. But as far as deans, I really didn't see any African American deans or any upper level people of color in positions of power when I was there, with the exception of a few pockets, but there were, very strong researchers. And, I actually found mentorships from professors that were in other areas. Like, there was a guy by the name of Victor Rogers, and he was actually a chemistry professor. And, he's really served as one of my mentors. But like I said, my friend was from Howard University and he was an engineering major. So that was his advisor too. So we all did things together and we kind of created our own support system, outside of the programs as well. Because really within the program, you really didn't see a lot of people of color or individuals who looked like you who could even help you out. So,
Okay. So being back at South Carolina State is, totally different. Your
mhm.
faculty, while still diverse,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
more African American faculty there, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, that's the norm. And I think that's one of the great things about HBCUs is that you get to see people that look like you in positions of power, chairs, deans, provosts, president. And I mean, I really think that's what helps to catapult, our students um, into the world, to the levels of success that you see amongst HBCU grads. I think a lot of that is because of the self-esteem and the confidence that we're able to build because of what we see, every day. Our colleagues, your classmates, and you just see so many people doing positive things. And then I think that really does build us up and help us tremendously, regardless of what we decide to do in the future. So.
Now you said you've been there for over 17 years.
Mhm.
That's a long time. What do you enjoy most about your work?
I think what I enjoy most about my work really is the success of my students. I've been there long enough now that I mean, I'm really seeing my students prosper in their careers. Like I said, I have 5 students now that are currently finishing up PhD programs at the University of Iowa, and that program is ranked one of the top 3 PhD programs in the country. So I'm really proud of the success of the alums and not just those 5 students, but since I've been back, there have probably been over 20 students that have gone on to pursue PhDs. One of my former students is Felicia Johnson, and she is currently the commissioner for the South Carolina State Vocational Rehabilitation Department, and she's the first African American female to ever serve in that capacity. So as I just reflect over the past 17 years and finally seeing a lot of my students' goals comes to fruition. That's really what kind of keeps me motivated and keeps me going. But really, just the success of the grad students that have come through that program.
Nice. Now, shifting into, student success, obviously that's something you're really excited about.
Mm-hmm.
You're super busy over at South Carolina State as a
Mm-hmm.
professor, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also a huge HBCU advocate, so much so
Mm-hmm.
that you recently launched a publication,
Mm-hmm.
the HBCU Times. So tell us more about that and how it all came about.
You know what? I said I was actually, this all came about from a Facebook group. There, you're in it. It's a Facebook group called the HBCU Times. And a couple years ago, I was back and forth from Orangeburg to Camden with my mother. She was suffering from cancer at the time, and I was back and forth spending time with her. And you know how it is after chemo, she'd be exhausted. So it's 6:30 some nights she'd be asleep, and I was just sitting around. Really, I was bored one night, and I started a Facebook group called the HBCU Times. It's something I always wanted to do anyway. And, by the time I woke up the next morning, there were already like 3,500 people in the group. All of my friends just kept constantly adding people to the group. And then I just kind of developed the mission from day one of the group was really just to provide information about HBCUs that's positive, informative, honest, and transformational. And that became the mission of the group. And about a year later, I said, I want to do something a little more meaningful, with that group. So I decided to launch the magazine, and the magazine has the exact same mission of the Facebook group, and that's just to provide positive um, information about HBCUs, and we do that through both digital and print mediums to provide the world with an abundance of stories about the success of HBCUs and our alums.
Nice. Well, congratulations on that. And as far as the HBCU Times Group, I'm not sure exactly when you
Mm-hmm.
created it, but when I found it, it was already like a booming Facebook community.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you find that having this platform as far as the magazine and then also the Facebook group where you're able to build community, how did those link for you and what you put into the publication?
Well, I mean, it's pretty much the same. I look at the Facebook group, and I'm always looking at success stories, and that's what I really want to tell is some of those stories about the success of our alums that have not been told, and you know just working at an HBCU, and you've been around a little bit too, so that's I think that's one of the weaknesses about HBCUs is that we don't always do a good job of getting our stories out. There are some HBCUs that do an excellent job. Claflin does an excellent job of getting information out. North Carolina A&T, they do an excellent job of getting the information out. Howard University, FAMU, etc. But there's still quite a few HBCUs that really don't do a great job or don't have the resources to get information out. So, basically, I just started looking at all of the websites for all of the HBCUs and looking at all the Facebook and Twitter feeds, and I just take the best stories, from those university websites and social media accounts, and um, you know, some stories have a longer shelf life than others, and I just use a team of individuals that I sit down and really trust, and we really kind of talk about which stories we think will make good stories for the magazine. And you know, we completed the first issue. The first issue came out around September, and we're wrapping up the second issue. It should be out the first week in April. But really, the theme of both the Facebook group and the magazine is really just to get out more positive stories about HBCUs. There's a lot. There's just so much good stuff going on at HBCUs, and we have HBCU Digest, we have HBCU Buzz, HBCU Connect, and a couple of other digital media outlets, but there are really not a lot of print, um, not a lot of magazines that do HBCU type of stories via print. And, that's what we really wanted to do to kind of set us apart from some of the other entities that were already out there. But I think there needs to be more because we still can't tell all of those stories that need to be told about HBCU.
Yeah, absolutely. That was going to be one of my questions as well. Why you chose to go the publication route, especially with this
Hmm.
being such a digital age. But it seems that you guys have a really great circulation, and it's still able to get into the hands of the individuals who need it.
It's to me, it seems like everybody has their preference. It seems like younger people prefer digital, older people prefer print publications. But when I really look at the from in its totality, it seems like stories that are in the print magazine, they for some reason they stick around a little bit longer, or they make a different type of impression on the readers. And once you see something online, you don't always go back to it. But when you have a print copy, I mean, you may take that copy to work. I mean, I just think it has a longer shelf life when it's in print form. And I do believe print is making a strong comeback. And I just thought it would be nice to have a really nice print magazine, for the HBCU Times. And that would be something that would be a little bit different from the other things that were out there at the time.
Nice. Well, I love seeing it. I knew about it by being a part of the group, the Facebook group, but I
Hmm.
didn't actually see
Hmm.
it in physical form until homecoming at Claflin. And
Hmm.
at the hotel, there were some issues, and I was really excited to see it and a lot of the stories that were in there. But speaking of the stories, how were you able to pull together the individuals you did? I see you have Mary Beth Gasman, who's
Hmm.
she was a part of the inaugural issue and wrote a story, and you had some really other great stories in there. I think you guys
Hmm.
profiled Dr. Tisdale, who's class
Hmm.
president, and then you also told a really great story of a family and their HBCU legacy.
Yeah.
So I know tons of stories, like you said, are coming at you at all times. How do you whittle it down to those that you guys want to place in the magazine?
Yeah. You know what? I said, each story, was important to me for different reasons. For example, I knew the Stansel family. We're pretty much from the same neighborhood in Camden, South Carolina. We're from a little small community called Kirkwood, South Carolina. And I used to play basketball with Ambry's brother. Ambry is the young lady who graduated from South Carolina State, and she's an accountant for the new Mercedes Benz Stadium. And her brother went to Xavier, and then he went on to Meharry and became a dentist. But I used to play basketball with him, so I really knew that family, and I was always proud of what they were able to do because they were all extremely bright, high SAT scores, high ACT scores, um, very athletic. They could have gone to school anywhere, but they intentionally, went to HBCUs. And then looking at Ambry's daughter, who recently graduated from Howard University, to me that was a no-brainer. I always wanted to do something with them to kind of get their story out, really to inspire other families to consider HBCUs who wouldn't consider HBCUs otherwise. Um, and Robert Porcher, I did an article on him, Black College Hall of Fame. He was actually a classmate of mine. We both graduated from the criminal justice program at the same time. So I've maintained a pretty good relationship with him. And I just wanted, more of his story to be told. Amori Washington, a reason to love HBCU. She's actually a student who's working at Claflin. She's an English major, but she's a brilliant writer. And it was just a pleasure working with her. I mean, she really did edit, and she proofread almost every single article in the magazine. And I mean, I think she's a senior this year, but she was only a junior when we started the process. And I just couldn't ignore the success that Dr. Tisdale has had in terms of his capital campaign. I mean, it's very difficult for universities to have successful capital campaigns, these days for various reasons. But to be able to raise $105 million in this economic climate, I just thought it was amazing. And I think the information was shared, generally throughout, the South Carolina area, but I don't think that story, made the national headlines that I thought it should have. So I really, really wanted to spotlight him. And Mary Beth, just looking at the work that she does at the University of Penn, which is an Ivy League school, and how they study minority serving institutions. I just wanted her perspective and to bring something unique to the table. And I reached out, and she didn't hesitate. She was excited about the opportunity. And, it was just great working with her. And Dr. Ivory Tosin, he's a professor at Howard. Father went to Southern University. I mean, he's just one of our strongest advocates for HBCUs in the entire country. And the work that he's doing is just simply, phenomenal. And the story on our alumni spotlight, that was Ebony Hillsman. That's somebody I actually met through the Facebook group, but she was a big time program director for CNN, Florida A&M graduate. And I just kind of looked up her profile on LinkedIn when I was thinking about the magazine, and I gave her a call, and she just shared, a ton of information with me that she didn't have to share. And connected me to the right people to really get this done. So I just wanted to do something to kind of spotlight what she's doing as well. And those are just some of the stories and kind of why I picked those stories.
Awesome. Yeah, they're really great stories. If you all have not gone to the website, visit hbcutimes.com, and there you can get a copy, pay for a copy. Do you guys have them all mailed, or are you able to just, once you pay, see the digital copy?
Yeah, you can pay and see. I'm actually giving the digital copy away now. But if you want a hard copy, we mail those out, and you get those within 3 to 5 business days.
Nice. Well, I've loved all of the stories. I'm so excited to, read the next few. And speaking of the stories that we have, and so many that we need to tell related to HBCUs, I'm thinking I saw that recently you were a part of the Tell Them We Are Rising viewing that was on the South Carolina State campus.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
the Tell Them We Are Rising, the story of Black colleges and universities, which is directed by award-winning documentary filmmaker Stanley Nelson. It will be airing
Mhm.
this coming Monday, February 19th, on PBS Independent Lens. But how was it seeing that film and being a part of, I think, a panel discussion at South Carolina State here recently?
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up. That was an absolutely amazing experience. I thought the documentary was really put together well. I liked the way he told the stories that he told. I felt like I was traveling through different eras of time. And I mean, I really wished it were a little. My only critique is I wish it was a little bit longer. But the thing I really enjoyed the most about the documentary was how they showed the impact of HBCUs in terms of leading efforts for civil rights and advocacy. Back in the days with sit-ins at North Carolina A&T and other institutions, even to today with the Black Lives Matter, movement, and just showing the importance of advocacy and fighting for your civil rights. And I just thought he did an excellent job of weaving that all, throughout, different eras and times. And I just thought it was a brilliant film. I'm looking forward to seeing the documentary on Monday again.
I wasn't able to come. I did have plans to come, but I wasn't able to make it. But one of the things I was
Mhm,
wondering about, especially with,
mhm,
the generations and then with the current generation that is currently in college, how do you think they received it? Do you think it was received well and they had a better understanding of what their grandparents, parents went through so that they could,
I do, and just hearing some of the conversations that even within the panel, there was at least one student on the panel, and she definitely acknowledged a greater appreciation for what some of our ancestors and people who went before us went through, so that we can sit in classes and teach classes and even be on a college campus, and some of the sacrifices and people paid the ultimate sacrifice with their life so that we could have some of the liberties and freedom that we have. So the students were absolutely appreciative of the opportunity to see it, and they learned a great deal about history, and I think it's motivated them to dig a little deeper and learn a little bit more about some of the things that went on during those times.
now, before we kind of jump out of this space that we're in and just kind of talking about HBCUs, we'll
Mhm,
still be talking about HBCUs. But I wanted to know from you, because you were so moved to tell the story
mhm,
much better with your publication, as well as creating a community online and several of the other communities that are out
mhm,
there, even this documentary. What is it that you
mhm.
think we could do? And that's just everybody who's either a part of the HBCU community, had grandparents who went to HBCU. What is it that you think we all could do
Mhm.
better to better tell our stories moving forward?
I think we have to do a better job of communicating with our um, alumni affairs office back at the universities. I think we have to communicate information to our public relations offices. Just talking to different people and interviewing different people for the magazine. The first thing I ask them, is, does your university even know, how successful you've been and what you're doing? And they usually say no. So with so many people graduating, it's very difficult for the university to keep up with everybody. But I think something that we all could do better is just communicating back, to the university, particularly our alumni affairs office, alumni relations, public relations offices, and let them know, what's going on and where we are and what we're doing. And also the university, I think what they can do better is, I think we really need to develop like a comprehensive database to really track all of our graduates, because we're moving into an era where you really have to prove through data that what you're doing is being successful. And, it's one thing to have an idea of where your graduates are. It's a whole nother thing when you can actually produce data to show exactly where your people are, your alums are. So
Also,
those are a couple of things that we could do better. And also give back. I mean, that's one way to stay connected to the university is, and that, one of the challenges that HBCUs face is most of us have financial challenges. And one of the ways we can offset that or remedy that is by increasing alumni giving. So if you're an alum of an HBCU, or even if you just went there for a year and you still want to support your HBCU, give back. It doesn't have to be a lot, but start with something, because a lot of times when these HBCUs are having capital campaigns, the first thing major donors want to know is what percentage of your alumni gives back. And we have all these cute slogans. I love my HBCUs, and that's great. But we need to transition from I love my HBCUs to I financially support my HBCUs.
right. I love that. That's we might have to be that direct in the next campaign.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Okay. Now, as far as HBCU life and just kind of reminiscing a little bit for you, what would you say is some of your favorite HBCU undergraduate memories at South Carolina State?
Well, just the community and just meeting people, from diverse backgrounds on that campus and just watching, so many people, transform and become leaders in their respective professions. When I was a student at South Carolina State University, I was a criminal justice major, but I was also a broadcasting minor. So I did a internship with 90.3 WSSB. That's the radio station for South Carolina State University, and I really immersed myself in that culture and spent a lot of time, in the basement of Nance Hall. And a lot of the fond memories I have of South Carolina State, you know, kind of go back to my experience being on the radio as a student, working with other broadcasting majors, working basketball games and things of that nature. So, I wouldn't trade my HBCU experience for the world, but the basketball games, the culture at the football games, I'm just having a great time. Um, you know, so.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. I tell people I have a few cousins at HBCUs or just in college in general, and I always tell them to just get
Hmm.
involved. Don't just be, a part of the club that are strictly related to
Hmm.
your major. Just get out there and get a little
Hmm.
bit more information about what everyone is doing because you just never know how it'll come back around in life for you. And look at you, you're kind of using that experience. Um, to have a magazine now. So
Exactly. And even a lot of the people, who, contributed to the magazine, were colleagues that I met at South Carolina State. Willis Williams, she was also a student at South Carolina State University, during that time. My wife, she's the co-owner and co-CEO of the magazine. She graduated, excuse me, she graduated from Albany State University, and she received her master's degree from South Carolina State University. Um, but just maximizing existing resources to kind of generate excellence moving forward, and just reaching back into some of those old relationships that were established right there on the campus of South Carolina State University.
nice. Well, that is cool. So it's a husband and wife HBCU pair providing all of
Hmm.
this great content to the HBCU community. So that's cool. I did not know that.
Yes.
Nice. Now, you spoke a little bit about giving back and to your alma mater. And of course,
Mhm.
financially is always a good way. But for you personally, what does giving back look like for you?
For me, giving back definitely means, a financial contribution to the institution, monthly. Giving back also means you can give back with your time. You don't necessarily have to give back with financial resources. We have a lot of, we still have a lot of students who need mentors. A lot of times, when you have professors, a lot of times the age gap between the professor and student can be kind of great. So the students don't always listen to their professors in terms of the professional development advice and things students need to do to be successful. I would I would actually say, so alumni who are interested in giving back, you can also give back with your time, just being a mentor to some of these young scholars, on the various HBCU campuses, to help prepare them with some of the soft skills that you need to have developed to be successful, in the current labor market.
Now, are you a part of South Carolina State's Alumni Association? Is that another one of your ways of giving back?
Oh, definitely, definitely a part of the South Carolina State Alumni Association. I'm also a part of the University State Club. I'm a season ticket holder. I purchase tickets for the annual gala every year. I still mentor students, both graduate and undergraduate students. I'm always advocating on behalf of the university. I also serve as the faculty senate president at South Carolina State University. So I'm constantly engaged in service activities and giving back.
Now, if you could encourage your fellow alumni to back in any
Mhm.
capacity, any of the ways that you just explained, what would you say to them?
I would just say, for HBCUs to survive, we have to go beyond just coming back for homecoming. And for HBCUs to truly survive, we need you to contribute financially, but we also need your ideas to move forward. Because oftentimes when you graduate and you become, leaders in all of these different sectors, I mean, you have the type of knowledge that institutions need to improve their curriculum. So, if you don't have the money or time to give back, you can serve, on advisory boards, you can share information back with the university. Um, a big thing at HBCUs is customer service. HBCUs aren't necessarily known for providing the best customer service. Um, I look at um, I look at Wayne Murphy. He owns the Chick-fil-A in Orangeburg. He's an SC State alum. So I'm looking at, what are some ways we can get him to come in and train faculty and staff in terms of how to provide exemplary customer service. So there are different ways you can get back. So what I would say to them is, you can be creative in terms of the way that you give back to the university, but it's absolutely imperative that you do something.
Nice. I love what you said about everyone using their expertise. I think that's one of the things that we lack in because people go out and they work, for entertainment companies or they own franchises, like you said, and we're not seeing those particular individuals, not just them, but some people. You have all this knowledge that you could bring back to either your university or your alumni association to come up with creative ways to get people engaged or creative ways for people to give. So that's a really great idea. And I'm glad you brought it up because we got to start thinking about this whole giving back thing differently.
You know, I think it has to be institutionalized as well. Like we have to figure out a way to really teach that some kind of way. I don't know if it's University 101,
Mhm.
freshman seminar, but we really have to impart the importance of giving back very early in the process because it seems a little more difficult to convince somebody, 20 years later, when we have the opportunity to do it when we had them on campus when they were younger. So we got to figure out a way to really institutionalize it and make it popular to give back.
If you could encourage a student to actually
Mhm.
attend South Carolina State or any other HBCU, what would you say?
I would say, first of all, HBCUs are amazing institutions. I would say you should definitely consider South Carolina State University. When you look at the history of South Carolina State dating back to 1896, we have over 30,000 alumni worldwide. SC State has produced over 15 college presidents. We've produced 22 generals in the military. The current Miss USA is a South Carolina State University graduate. With the success of all of the alums of the university, I think South Carolina State University would be a great choice, but not just South Carolina State University. When you look at the success of HBCU alums, I don't see how a person of color would not consider, an HBCU. You take a look at, some of the most successful individuals in our culture. Oprah Winfrey is a graduate of Tennessee State University, and you look at the economic impact that HBCUs have on this nation. Um, the USA Today Gallup did a Gallup poll. I think it was in 2015, and it basically stated that HBCU graduates do better than Black graduates at predominantly white institutions in a number of areas, including financial well-being. So, if the chances are, if you attend an HBC, you're going to be more successful in your career, no matter what you choose. We produce more doctors, more lawyers, more engineers. 80% of the judges in this country, black judges, came from HBCU. So I'm like, I don't understand how a person would consider an HBCU.
Yes, I love that. Always great to end with some statistics when it comes down to
So
convincing someone to go to an HBCU, and all of those still hold true.
yeah,
They're really
yeah,
really great stats to have in your back pocket. So anybody listening, these are all the reasons you should attend an
yeah,
HBCU. So, what else is
definitely.
coming up for you personally or professionally that you would love to share, as well as coming up for the HBCU Times?
Well, the HBCU Times, the spring edition is going to launch. Like I said, it's going to be the first week of April. We're really excited about that, and also the whole vision that I have for the HBCU Times is not just going to be a magazine, but it's also going to be a nonprofit component to it. I'm also going to be in the process of developing an HBCU Times think tank. I think we need empirical data and research to support the continuing existence of HBCUs. And oftentimes we argue and we promote and advocate for HBCUs with our emotions, but we really need to have hard data to support what we do to continue the legacy of excellence for HBCUs. So over the next year or so, we will be developing think tanks. The nonprofit is already established, so we can also, give back to the HBCU community. And those are a few things that we're working on right now.
Nice. Well, congratulations. I'm excited about everything that you guys going on, especially a think tank. I participated in one while I was in college at North Carolina A&T. We drove up, and it was like one of my fondest memories because it was just so many people, so many ideas,
Yes.
and so I really love those.
Absolutely. Well, I'm absolutely proud of the work that you're doing with your HBCU podcasts, and your interviews are simply amazing. And I'm always looking forward to hearing the next one. So keep up the great work that you're doing, and I love the way you're giving back to the Claflin Alumni Association with your service and leadership, and just continue to be the example and the beacon of light that you are. Very proud of you.
Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much for being a part of the HBCU podcast. The last thing is, where can listeners find out more about the HBCU Times? Where are you online, on social? Share that with us.
Sure. You can find information about the HBCU Times at www.hbcutimes.com. We also have a Facebook group called HBCU Times, and you can also email me at hbcutimes@gmail.com.
Nice. Well, for everyone who's listening, you can find all of that information at the hbcupodcast.com, as well as on our social. We'll also share all of this information in the show notes. David, again, thank you for being here. Congratulations on everything. And I'm looking forward to everything that's coming up in 2018 for you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much for listening to the HBCU podcast. We have so much more HBCU content on the way, so make sure you subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast, and visit us at thehbcupodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the HBCU Podcast. Like us on Facebook. We love you for listening. Until next time.